Our guest on today's episode is a trailblazer. After more than 30 years of rising up the leadership ladder in the male-dominated banking industry, she shifted gears to take up the chief executive role at a private tech company. The title of her autobiography perhaps describes her best. She truly is indomitable. Arundhati Bhattacharya is the former chairperson of the State Bank of India. She not only led India's largest public sector bank through numerous challenges in the country's financial sector, but was also responsible for pioneering a lot of digital transformation at the institution. Coming back after retirement, she has now taken up the top job in India at US tech giant Salesforce. Her story is that of determination, resilience, and reinvention. Hello everyone, I am Divya Shekhar and this is Leadership Mantras with Forbes India. Welcome to Leadership Mantras, Arundhati. It's wonderful to be speaking with you today. When you're in your 60s, you've retired and, you've seen your share of successes and accomplishments. What does it take to take the plunge into something challenging? And do you feel that you have certain qualities that helped you do that in this case?
First of all, thank you for having me on this series. So, I've always been a little bit of a sucker for a challenge. Challenges motivate me, challenges probably energize me. Taking the plunge was something that I have been doing for a long time. I think being outside of your comfort zone is something that that keeps you, again, as I said, motivated and energized. Don't like to get bored. Okay, so if you don't want to get bored, you need to do different things, and if they are a little outside of your comfort zone, so much the better, because then you can sort of prove yourself. If you talk about self-motivation, it's a question of what you really believe is your comfort zone. Do you want to be outside of it or do you want to be within it? I think being outside of it is far more fun actually, because again you have some goals. Then you wake up in the morning and you feel good about it because you've got some little bit of challenge to overcome, a small hill to climb. So I think these are the things that result in doing things even at my age. And while age is definitely a factor, mainly because it's something that's physical, but mentally I don't think anybody really needs to age if they don't want to. Physically one will, whether you like it or not. It's a process of nature. You can try and delay it as much as possible, but it will still catch up with you at some point of time. But mentally I think it's completely up to us as to how we see ourselves.
But what does it take to be this agile and to keep learning, especially when the world around us keeps changing in ways that we don't recognize it anymore?
So I think what it takes is, I feel uncomfortable when I don't know something. I feel uncomfortable, for instance, when I don't understand something that's come up at all. And I don't like that discomfort. I like to be while I don't like that discomfort, I am willing to go the extra mile in order to learn that stuff, because it gives me a sense of comfort. Okay, I talk about pushing myself outside of the comfort zone, but that is in order to come back into a sense of comfort where you feel that, well, you understand what's going on. You understand that this is something controllable. This is not something beyond you. This is not something that's going to drive you, that you can drive that. Okay, so I think that's the kind of mindset that probably I have, and that's probably what drives me.
I want to take you back to your childhood now, say from growing up, your initial days in Chhattisgarh to finally, working in such huge institutions in Bombay. It's been quite a journey.
That's
and
right.
If you would like to, if you can talk about your family and what their influences have been, what your childhood was like, and how that has sort of shaped you in to become the person that you are today.
So one thing is, my family has very strong women. Both my mother and aunt, they were very strong people. They had lost their parents at a very early age, and they had sort of self-taught themselves. My mother helped bring up her two young siblings along with her elder brother. And one thing that she used to say, and they were a little Gandhian in the way they sort of operated. For instance, she would tell me that, you should never be idle. So even when she would be talking to her friends and all, she'd be doing something with her hands. She was very good at crocheting, so she'd be doing that. She was very good at handicrafts, so she would have little scraps of cloth with which she made lovely flowers and stuff like that. So I would see her always busy doing things. Similarly, even though in those days household help was very difficult to come by and we didn't have too much of it, but even then she found time to do a lot of social activities. Because we were in a steel plant, there had been a lot of villages that had got displaced because of the acquiring of the land, and the villages had been pushed out sort of, and there were a lot of women that had lost their livelihoods or needed to re-establish their livelihoods. And she worked with them in order to do a number of activities in order to improve their income, and this was in the late 50s, so it's not now. So one thing of course is that doing social work, the other is thinking for people beyond yourself, always using your time profitably. Even if you're like today, there are a lot of advertisements that say that while you're watching TV, you can also exercise. I often remember my mother who used to say that while you're talking and chatting with your friends, use your hands for doing something that's productive. So multitasking at those times. Even things like, and this is something that I've narrated in my book, in those early days in Bhilai, there was hardly any medical help. We only had a medical center, and we had a neighbor who had a very sad incident where their child passed away on account of the fact that the right diagnosis was not done. We just didn't have the facilities there. Okay, nobody's fault, but that's the way it was. But after that, my mother sort of took it on herself to study homeopathy, because that's all that she could do at that point of time, because she did not want to feel helpless within the situation. The same thing that I told you, I don't like to feel helpless in front of new technology, in front of new things. So she actually studied late into the night after one of us were in bed, in order to get her registration done. And she died at the age of 90, and till 3 months before her death, she was still dispensing medicines. So she had learnt it all on her own and had a pretty flourishing practice. And in fact, in Bokaro, where we were at a later stage, people knew me more as her daughter than they knew me through my father, though my father was the employee of the steel plant. So she was quite well known for it. So those are the sort of examples that I've had throughout childhood. She also used to tell me always that look for a career and not a job. There is a difference, so just don't look for a job, look for a career. You need to build, and also you need to have an identity for yourself. Identity that is all your own, not dependent on who your father is or who your parents are or who your spouse is or who your children are. You need an identity of your own. So that's also something that was drilled into me very early on in life.
There are such few women leading companies or in leadership positions, in the country today. And what will it take to have more women in leadership positions?
So one thing, of course, is it's first of all a factor of time. The first women probationary officer in my earlier institution, that is the SBI, came in 50 years before I did. So it took us 50 years to transit from being a probationary officer into the corner office. Okay? So one is a factor of time. It takes time because you have to have a sufficient number of people in order to have that selection process throw up a few people for the top. Okay? Because as you go up, it is a selection process, and it's like a wide base, and then it's a kind of a pillar structure, not a pyramid structure. So there is a lot of elimination that happens along the way, and unless you have a large number of them, you won't see them going right to the top. That's the number one. The number two thing is that the leakage in the pipeline of women is very high. And I was just talking about it to one of your colleagues, that that's something that we really need to focus on. Because if you see the number of people who are getting recruited, the number of women, they could be as high as 33 to even 37%. If you see the number of women in senior positions, that is really senior management positions, it's as low as 4%, 5%. Okay? So that really shows you that women are actually leaving. And why are they leaving is what we need to try and find.
Did you ever wrestle with this guilt that women face during their careers, like we discussed, domestic responsibilities, caregiving responsibilities, etc. And if you did, how did you tackle it?
So this is something that I think there is no woman who doesn't wrestle with it. Having said that, I think feeling guilty doesn't make any difference to anybody other than to you yourself. You're doing it to yourself. First and foremost, we need to realize that it's something that you can control. Feeling guilty is up to you, and living by the standards that society sets for you, you need to take a call whether you want to do that or not. Okay? There is no way that you can be you can be independent of this, but you need to take a hold of it and be rational about it. Okay? Everybody takes decisions, whether you are at home or at work. There will be moments when you take a decision and you don't know the outcome of the same. Okay? You have to live by those decisions. There will be regrets in life. There is no life without a regret. You just have to take it as part of living, okay, and not be overwhelmed by it. So I think that's the only way to handle it. Be rational about it. Instead of being driven by your heart, just be driven by your mind where this is concerned.
And how did you learn your first management and leadership lessons on the job?
Well, on the job, if you ask me, my first management lessons is very difficult to recall at this stage. After all, I've had a 45-year-long career. But I remember, for instance, in State Bank, where I joined at the age of 21 and a half, there was, in those days, they had manual ledgers. Okay? And those ledgers were really thick. They were this big, this thick, and there was a ledger keeper who came and told me he was going on leave. So I had given him his leave, and he came and told me, I'd like to know who's the person who's going to sit in my place. So I told him, that's no business of yours, okay? Because that's my business as to who I put in your place. So he said, no, it isn't. It's also my lookout, and I'll tell you why if you'll come to my desk. So I went to his desk, and I found that his ledger, he had beautiful handwriting, absolute copper plate handwriting, and his ledger was a pleasure to behold. And he said, I don't want one of these youngsters, who don't know how to write and who will be making cuttings and things like that, because, I'm proud of this ledger. I like the way I write this, and you have a look at it page by page and you'll understand. So I realized quite early on that, people take pride in different things. As I told you, everybody has their own different buttons. They're not the same, okay? And you should learn to honor that. You should learn to honor the fact that they might be doing a job which is different from yours, which might need much less skills, but which they are still proud of doing. And if they are proud of doing that, it's your job to ensure that you make them more proud of it, because that will give them the energy to do it far better.
Can you recollect any particular? Can you recollect a decision that has been extremely tough for you to make, be it when you were the chairperson of SBI or in your current role? And can you tell us how you went about doing that?
So I can recollect several of them, and especially as chairman, yep, a number of them. The way I tried to handle it is, first of all, be as informed as possible about what could be the possible, different solutions. Now, the choice you make has to be as informed as possible. Okay? So, you have to know, or at least anticipate, what could be the outcomes of each of these solutions. And then you have to take a studied call as to which solution you will choose. Again, as I said, you live by your decisions. The decision could be right, the decision could be wrong, but the only way of handling this is to try and ensure that you have as much information as possible on it. Not only information, this is a time when you need people whom you trust and who you know are superior in their experience of those particular areas. You need them to be around you, because you will not have the solution to everything. You will need to rely on people, and if you need to rely on people, you need to get the best people around you. Sometimes you will find leaders do not do that, and I feel they do not do it as a result of some kind of insecurity. So, the first step there is to be comfortable in your own skin. You do not need to feel insecure. As a leader, I think it is important for us to not only trust our team, but to enable the team to run with the whole thing, not keep anything back, because every team will need a leader. To feel that if your team knows everything, you will be redundant as a leader is a very, I personally find it a very silly notion. If that was the case, no cricket team would have a captain, no football team would have a captain as well. So, every team does need a leader. Does that mean that the team does not need to have the full information or can't contribute? Not so at all.
So, micromanaging is just not your leadership style?
No, not at all. Not at all. In fact, if you ask me, if you ask most of my earlier colleagues, and you should ask them, many of them will say that one of the reasons we enjoyed working with her was because she gave us space. So, I believe in putting the right people in the right place, selling them my vision, and then allowing them to execute. That is my style.
I read an anecdote in an article wherein you had said that your peers used to tell you that you are an aggressive personality. How did that come about? What was the context at the time?
So actually, I was in a branch early on in my career which was very disturbed. There was a lot of union activity, but more than that, in those days, as you know, customer service was not so developed or emphasized, and this branch was really more or less in the doldrums. And when I took over, in the inspection rating, they were at the lowest rating. As I said, the customer service was nothing to write home about, lot of activism. So when I went in there, I found that if I wasn't aggressive, if I wasn't loud, I wouldn't be heard at all, and nobody would be listening to me. So I learned to become aggressive there, whether it be in my body language, whether it be in my communications, whether it be in the sheer volume of my voice. I learned to do that, and then because it worked, and it worked very well, that branch, by the time I left it, it was at the second most highest most rung in inspections, and things had improved a lot over there. I adopted it as a style that worked. unconsciously. Okay? And yet, you know, what got you there won't get you to where you need to be. So I needed to change that, but I hadn't realized it that I had actually adopted it as a style of coming across. And when I did see myself, you know, this was a videograph done at IIM Lucknow, and when I saw it, I was very surprised myself, because I hadn't really pictured myself as, you have your own mental pictures. You know, I always thought of myself as a very sweet young person kind of thing, which probably I wasn't at all. But you have these mental pictures, and I couldn't even imagine being aggressive. I always thought I was a gentle person, but that wasn't the case.
And again, this is quite a generic one. If you had to sort of give an advice to women who are either starting out or women who are struggling maybe at different stages in their career or are trying to make their career, what would that one piece of advice be?
So one piece of advice that I've been always giving women is just hang in there. You know, giving up is very easy. Hanging in there isn't. So don't take the easy way out. I know there are times when you may have to give up. If you have to give up, find another way. Meaning, you give up, but you come back. There are ways of coming back, whether it be, you know, being self-employed, whether it be changing your line, whether it be doing something entirely different, but hang in there. You know, you do need to do something that is outside of your home space.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time, Arundhati. It was wonderful speaking with you.
Thank you so much for having me, and it was great speaking to you too.
And to all the people watching this video, for more videos on leadership mantras, log on to Forbes India or follow our YouTube channel. This is Divya Shekhar. See you next time.